Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson. We're brought to you by Pick 6, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Use code RWPicks for $50 in Pick 6 credits with a $5 deposit. Got a great mailbag episode for you today. As you know, the top 400 prospect rankings were fully updated on Friday, and we've had a bunch of prospects traded at the trade deadline. So just a ton of stuff to get to. I thought the top 400 update went really well, so I definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't already. The team top 20s are updated to reflect all of the trades. I haven't quite added every player from the 2024 draft to those team top 20s, but everyone from the top 400 is on there so far, and those should be fully updated and fully robust here in the month of August. And the next thing I'll be working on after this episode and ensuing article will be the Dynasty Rankings update, final Dynasty Rankings update of the regular season. So keep your eye out for that, hopefully early next week for those Dynasty Rankings update. Okay, let's get into, I had a lot of questions from people just about, which prospects got, benefit the most from getting traded and having kind of a clear path to playing time, that sort of thing. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the prospects that I sort of think fit the bill there. To me, the biggest theme of this trade deadline was that the hitters that got traded, for the most part, were bat first players, guys who are going to be second baseman, first baseman, designated hitters, left fielders. You did not see teams moving players that they thought could be quality, offense and defense shortstops, offense and defense center fielders, good defensive third baseman. Those types of players were just not getting moved here. So we had a lot of teams sort of trading from excess of players that just weren't going to provide enough value on both sides of the ball to realistically play a bunch for them. And that starts with Nick York, who got traded from the Red Sox to the Pirates. I think he benefits because the current Red Sox regime was not the Red Sox regime that drafted York in the first place. They don't really have any allegiances to him. He's had a really nice kind of post-hype year, especially since getting promoted to AAA, but I just don't think the Red Sox brass was going to play him every day at second base or anything like that. So, he doesn't necessarily get to just supplant Nick Gonzalez. I still think Nick Gonzalez would be the second baseman to roster for the Pirates next year, but the Pirates don't have anyone standing in his way at designated hitter. They obviously like him. So I think that Nick York has a better chance to play now that he's with the Pirates. We had a bunch of position players getting moved to the Marlins, which is great because the Marlins probably had less hitting talent on their 40-man roster than any other team in baseball before all these trades and maybe even after all these trades. But, Connor Norby for over a year now has seemed like a very obvious candidate to get traded to a second division team where he could play second base regularly, maybe some left field, maybe some DH. Comically, he was optioned, I think, earlier today because they have Vidal Brujan and Otto Lopez that they want to get at bats to at second base. But I also think the Marlins are probably going to play service time games with Norby to some extent to make sure they get him under team control for as long as possible. So it's a bummer that Norby's not playing every day for the Marlins right now, but I do think Norby becomes someone that you can go after in deeper mixed leagues in 2025 now. Kyle Stowers, though, was also traded from the Orioles to the Marlins, no longer technically a prospect, but I do think Stowers, of all the guys the Marlins acquired, Stowers probably has the best chance to help in fantasy leagues down the stretch here over the next 2 months. Just was not a player that the Orioles were really going to be able to make room for. They've just got a ton of outfielders. I do think Stowers is a big league caliber hitter, a big league caliber corner outfielder, but he's more of a second division type of guy. So the move to the Marlins was great for Stowers' value. Davison De Los Santos obviously got moved from the Diamondbacks to the Marlins. Another player where De Los Santos, his best positions are going to be designated hitter and first base. Probably in that order. He's actually not too dissimilar from Jake Berger, who they've already got, but Berger at first, De Los Santos at DH, something like that, I could see working for them for most of 2025. And I just don't think a team with significant postseason aspirations like the Diamondbacks, I don't think they were going to go the De Los Santos route anytime soon. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Agustin Ramirez, who the Yankees traded to the Marlins, I think that's great for his value. Another kind of bat first catching prospect, if you will, could maybe get some designated hitter time as well. But just the Yankees have a ton of these guys. I don't think Ramirez was going to break through anytime soon. And I think it's, they already had like Ben Rice, who's kind of a more advanced version of Agustin Ramirez. They've it wasn't going to happen for Ramirez, I don't think, in New York. So he could be the Marlins. Like he could lead all Marlins catchers in playing time next year. I don't know if I'd bet on that, but he at least becomes a guy that I'm more interested in for like draft and hold leagues in 2025. Jared Cerna goes from the Yankees to the Marlins. Grant Pauley goes from the Padres to the Marlins. I think it's a little bit of a bummer that the Marlins acquired three guys where their best positions probably second base in Norby, Cerna, and Pauley. Pauley could probably handle some third base. That could even happen sometime this year, maybe next year. But I don't think Pauley was going to be an everyday player for the Padres anytime soon. And then Cerna, he's more of like a year and a half, 2 years away. So we'll see if someone like Norby has run away with that second base job by then. But Cerna at least has a better chance now that he's with the Marlins than he would have with the Yankees. One of my favorite change of scenery moves here was Matthew Lugo going from the Red Sox to the Angels. Lugo, when he was drafted, I think back in 2019, was actually a shortstop, but he slid all the way down the defensive spectrum to left field. And kind of similarly with Nick York, I just don't think the Red Sox, especially since they didn't draft Lugo, this current regime, I don't think he was going to be given much of a look at all in left field for them. So the Angels are another bad team. They're not quite as bad as the Marlins in terms of talent on the roster, but Lugo has a much better chance to play left field in Anaheim than he would have with the Red Sox. And then to a much lesser extent, Nico Cavadas, kind of a DH / first baseman, traded from the Red Sox to the Angels. I don't think Cavadas is more than like a quad A hitter, but he'll at least maybe get a chance to show that he could be more than that with the Angels, whereas I just don't think that was going to happen for him in Boston. Thyron Lorenzo, who I know on some like real life rankings was maybe the best position player to get moved at the deadline. He's outside my top 200 with these being for dynasty leagues, but you could at least see a clear path to Lorenzo being kind of a regular, semi-regular catcher with the Tigers than he would have with the Dodgers. He was behind Will Smith. He was behind Dalton Rushing, and, probably 2 years away from the big league. So, we'll see how Dylan Dingler does. I did add Dylan Dingler to the rankings inside the top 200 on the last update. So I think Dingler could be the Tigers catcher of the future, but Lorenzo will be coming, and it's a clear path. Although, we could always cite the Yordan Alvarez trade as a big failure of Andrew Friedman's in terms of the Dodgers trading away a prospect who ended up blowing up. But generally, they've got a pretty good track record of trading guys. Yusniel Diaz, Jeter Downs, Willie Calhoun. These are all guys who, when they were traded by the Dodgers at the deadline, were considered top 50 or at least borderline top 50 prospects. So the Dodgers do have a pretty good track record of trading the right guys. So something to keep in mind there with Lorenzo. And then to a much, much lesser degree, you had Mac Horvath and Matthew Etzel going from the Orioles to the Rays. Those guys were already sort of ranked as if they were going to get traded or certainly not break through with the Orioles. So, are Horvath and Etzel going to end up being everyday players for the Rays down the road? Probably not, but they're borderline top 400 prospects. They are both on the top 400. So this move at least gives them a slightly better chance than they would have had if they'd stayed with Baltimore. As for the pitchers, I think this is generally more for position players because it's very rare that teams just have a stacked rotation where pitchers just can't break through. Usually teams are going to find room for you if you're good enough to be in the rotation. But I do think it's interesting that the Orioles targeted Patrick Riley. He's a top 300 prospect per my most recent update, and just generally a good sign when the Orioles go after a pitcher. I'm so excited to see what they can do with him. He was with the Pirates. I do think the Pirates have an improving reputation. We talked about that last week with Alex Jensen, but just the fact that the Orioles wanted Riley, I think is something to note. And then, Robbie Snelling and Adam Mazur going from the Padres to the Marlins. Obviously the Padres kind of selling low on both of those guys, but I think it's nice that they're at least, Snelling and Mazur, they're going to get more opportunities to start with less pressure now that they're in Miami. I could see going after Mazur maybe in some draft and holds next year. Snelling, I think, is probably still about a year away. But at least they're kind of in a low pressure environment where if they're pitching decent at AAA, they will get a look. Whereas I think San Diego, at least for now, is just constantly in win as many games as possible mode. So probably a good change of scenery for Snelling and Mazur there. The Jays picked up, I think, 3 of the 7 best position players for fantasy that got moved in the deadline. Joey Loperfido, no longer a prospect, but he goes from Houston to Toronto. Jonathan Clase goes from Seattle to Toronto, and Charles McAdoo goes from Pittsburgh to Toronto. I don't think these moves significantly impact the value of any of these guys, but I just thought it was worth mentioning it since the Blue Jays did pick up 3 of these top 7 position players that I thought got moved at the deadline. I guess I didn't include established big leaguers, but Loperfido I think is close enough to qualify as a prospect for this discussion. I think Loperfido is going to be their strong side platoon left fielder going forward here over the rest of the season. Clase is not quite ready. I don't think for prime time, but at some point next year, Clase could step in if George Springer or Dalton Varsho get injured, or if Loperfido's not performing in left field. And then Charles McAdoo, the Pirates definitely sold high on him, but I love the bat speed. I love what he's done this year at high A and double A. I think he came into the year unranked, so it was definitely a sell high by the Pirates, but I think he could legitimately challenge Elvis Martinez for that third base job long-term there in Toronto. So good work by the Blue Jays to pick up Loperfido, Clase, and McAdoo. Got a question from Greg T saying, what do I think of Christopher Morel in Tampa? I love it. He was obviously a buy low statistically, had a 242 XBA, 218 BABIP. His O swing, his contact rate, his swinging strike rate were all career best for Morel, despite the fact he was hitting below the Mendoza line. So good buy low by the Rays. And I like that they just threw him out at second base in the very first game after the Cubs just would never play him there because of Nico Horner. And Morel hit another homer today, so he's got 2 homers. His first 2 hits for the Rays were homers. So with a guy like Morel, I just want him to be somewhere he's wanted. And it always sort of seemed like the Cubs were never quite satisfied with his defensive profile. I think the Rays are going to be a bit more creative, find a way to make it work. And they don't have that sort of log jam of Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner, immovable in the middle infield. So I think, having Morel do a lot of DHing and then do a little bit of second base, I think he's going to finish the year really strong and play pretty regularly for them in 2025. So I like the move for Morel going to Tampa. Chief F says, does the Isaac Paredes trade block Matt Shaw's path to a role in the big leagues with the Cubs? I just think a Shaw, Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner, third base, shortstop, second base setup was always going to be tough for the Cubs to pull off just because of Shaw's arm. I also look at the fact that Swanson and Horner had a combined 13 home runs this season. That's a pretty big problem. And they've got a ton of money committed to Swanson, so I don't really think he's going anywhere next year. But there was some chatter that Horner was in some trade talks at the deadline. Might make sense for the Cubs to sacrifice a little defense for offense there and try to move Horner in the offseason to make room for Shaw, or maybe at next year's deadline. But, I don't think it was ever all that realistic that Shaw was going to be able to pull off third base, especially when you're getting such little power production in the middle infield. I think it might make more sense to have Shaw at second base, Swanson at shortstop, because you're kind of stuck with that contract, and then try to get something for Horner. So, if Shaw just stays on his current trajectory, I think he will look like one of the Cubs' 4 or 5 best hitters at some point in the next year or two, and they will find a spot for him. But maybe, and it's not like Shaw was going to come up here down the stretch at third base anyway. So we are kind of still talking about something that's going to happen like a year from now. Frappy says, is Alex Clemmie the best piece that the Nationals got back in the Lane Thomas trade? He says that they can grab one guy in the NL only league from that deal. So that was Alex Clemmie, Rafael Ramirez, and Jose Tena, who went from Cleveland to Washington in that Lane Thomas deal. Rafael Ramirez, I think, is the clear third piece. So it's between Clemmie and Tena. Clemmie is still at single A. He's kind of all ceiling, 6'6". He's walking like 15% of batters right now, 60% of batters right now. Guy with that long of levers and already showing strike throwing issues. So there's a ton of risk there. He throws really hard. He's going to throw even harder. So there's a ton of Tommy John surgery risk as well with Clemmie. Tena, he's actually no longer prospect eligible technically for my rankings, just because the Guardians kept him on their active roster for so long last season, even though he's got fewer than 50 at bats in the big leagues. But Tena, I think, is a little interesting. He was having a really good year at AAA. He's got a 35% hard hit rate per Sports Info Solutions, which is really good, especially for a middle infielder who's probably going to play a little bit third base as well. Tena, if he did play third base for the Nationals, I think he's better than Trey Lipscomb, I think, and Lipscomb's been playing. So, I'm kind of tempted to go with Tena there. He's not that exciting, but I mean, he could be like a 15 homer, 15 steal, 250 type of hitter guy at third base. Maybe plays a little bit of second base against lefties. So I guess, do you want to chase the upside with Clemmie, who's probably like 4 years away? Or do you want to kind of go for a little bit of upside and a bit more stability? I think I'd go Tena there, but I'll leave that up to you. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate that. Did you ever play the over-under game with your friends? Think I can eat a slice of pizza in under 30 seconds, or I know it'll take you over a minute to down that 2-liter. If you have, then you're going to love Pick 6, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Here's how to play during baseball season. Pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat like runs, hits, strikeouts, and more. Track your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code RWPicks. New customers play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits. That's code RWPicks for new customers to play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. 1 per new customer, non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in most eligible states. Not available in all states, including New York and Connecticut. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere can affect how far a baseball flies by 20%. Home Run Forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the air is created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Home Run Forecast's premium site offers index values by the hour for each game, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction and speed, and even whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Home Run Forecast is offering a special for the start of the baseball season. You can get access to the premium site for the entire season for only $28, a savings of nearly 30%. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. Okay, we're back. And we got a lot more questions for you guys here. Again, for those that maybe missed it, the top 400 prospect rankings are fully updated as of Friday. I think those should be pretty helpful to you down the stretch here. Lots of pop-up guys, lots of guys I feel more confident in pushing up the rankings. And then kind of with the fallers, there's also kind of an extra layer of confidence there with just how big the sample is. So definitely check out the updated top 400 prospect rankings. A player who is inside the top 20 on those updated prospect rankings is Luke Keaschall of the Twins. Composite said, who do you think is a good comp for Luke Keaschall's ceiling? So I was thinking about this for a while, and then I thought of one that I actually really, really like, and that is Ian Kinsler. I'm sure most of you remember Ian Kinsler being pretty damn good for fantasy, about a decade ago, maybe more than that. I'm not sure if I'm dating myself too much there with an Ian Kinsler comp, but I think Keaschall is going to get the absolute most out of his tools, as did Kinsler, and just a chance to be good at everything that matters in fantasy. Like Keaschall's, he's probably not going to steal like 40 bases. He's not going to hit, I don't think he's going to hit 30 home runs, maybe more than once or twice, but he could go 20-20 some years. He could go 25-15 some years. I think he's going to hit for a high average. I think he's going to get on base a ton. I think he's going to hit near the top of the lineup. And it stood out to me when putting this update together that Keaschall is essentially the exact same age as Travis Bazzana of the Guardians and JJ Weatherholt of the Cardinals, who were both just selected in the top 7 of the 2024 draft. I think it's fair to kind of compare Keaschall to those guys since they're the exact same age. They basically play the exact same position. And if Bazzana or Weatherholt, let's just say Bazzana or Weatherholt were sent to Double-A in a week, and then they finish the year doing what Keaschall's done at Double-A, I think everyone would just be like, yeah, no question, Bazzana, top 10 prospect, maybe top 5 prospect, Weatherholt, top 10 prospect. So the fact that Keaschall's actually doing that now, like I thought he belonged ranked kind of right by those guys. I did rank Bazzana and Weatherholt ahead of him, just kind of as a nod to the pedigree there. But I think they're in the same tier, that's for sure. I really like Keaschall. I don't think he's like much of a sleeper or anything like that anymore. I've got him in my top 20. I know other smart people value him kind of in that range as well. So props to anyone who was able to add Luke Keaschall in the offseason. Okay, this is a fun question. So Jeffrey Thomas says, how would a combined top 10 first-year player draft rankings look from the 2023 and 2024 draft classes without knowing what we know now about the 2023 draft class? So to come up with this, I went back and looked at 2024 was the second year in a row that I posted a article of my first year player draft rankings the night of the first night of the draft. So I went back and looked at what I posted right after night 1 of the 2023 draft. And my tier 1 was Wyatt Langford, Dylan Cruz, Paul Skeens. My tier 2, I had more players in my tier 2, but just for the sake of coming up with this top 10, Max Clark was number 4. Walker Jenkins was number 5. Matt Shaw was number 6. Brock Wilken, number 7. And then this year, my tier 1 was Charlie Condon, Travis Bazzana, JJ Weatherholt. Tier 2, Jack Caglione, Connor Griffin, Theo Gillen, Bryce Rayner. I definitely liked Clark and Jenkins more than the prep hitters in this class after each night 1. So I like Caglione a bit more than I liked Wilken last year, but I think I liked Shaw a bit more last year than I liked Caglione this year. So here's my best guess as to how I would combine the 2023 and 2024 classes, and this is right after each draft, so not factoring in anything anyone did after getting into pro ball. So 1 Wyatt Langford, 2 Dylan Cruz, 3 Paul Skeens, 4 Charlie Condon, 5 Travis Bazzana, 6 JJ Weatherholt, 7 Max Clark, 8 Walker Jenkins, 9 Matt Shaw, and 10 Jack Caglione. So obviously last year's class was better. I take all the tier 1 guys from last year over the tier 1 guys from this year. And I did slot Paul Skeens in higher on those post-draft rankings than I slotted Condon in on these post-draft rankings. So hopefully that's useful. I regret not having Jenkins over Clark at the time, but at least I had Langford over Cruz at the time. And feel pretty good about not having Chase Davis as high as some people did after last year's draft. The prospect professor says, how does the trade to Tampa Bay influence your outlook on Aidan Smith and Brody Hopkins moving forward? It made me feel pretty good about where I had those guys. I had Smith at 103 and Hopkins at 351. I think that just looking at the trade, like that looked exactly right to me. Like that caliber of prospect getting moved in that Randy Arozarena trade. In terms of influencing the outlook, I trust the Rays with player development, but I also trust the Mariners, especially with pitching. So, I'm not gonna bump Hopkins up after the Mariners trade him, but I'm also not gonna move him down after the Rays trade for him. And then Aidan Smith, I couldn't really come up with any reason to be higher or lower on Aidan Smith after the trade, but it did just kind of confirm, because I know there are some people that have Smith, more highly ranked than I do. But I do think if Seattle saw him as like a borderline top 50 prospect, they would not have done the deal. So that made me feel better about where I had Smith ranked. And he's an athletic toolsy hitter. He's doing exactly what a 19-year-old, an older 19-year-old at single A should do. But we'll see how the hit tool translates at high A and double A. Zach Gonzalez, similar question, says, after Tampa Bay sent Randy Arozarena to Seattle, did Brody Hopkins or Aidan Smith get moved in your rankings at all to account for the new org, or did you just keep them where you initially had them on this update? I kept them where they were. It just, like I said, it seemed like they were valued how I was valuing them before the trade. That's not to say that I definitely would have moved them if it seemed like the Mariners or Rays were higher or lower on Smith and Hopkins than I was, but it was kind of like confirmation to me for where I had them slotted. Straface 23 says, how quickly do you think we see Junior Caminero take over on an everyday basis for Tampa Bay? August 25th is the first day the Rays can call up Caminero this year without him eclipsing his rookie eligibility. Recall that Caminero spent 10 days on the active roster in 2023. He would lose his prospect eligibility if he goes over 45 total days on the active roster before the end of this season. So I do expect the Rays to manipulate the system to the best of their ability here and make sure that they have a chance at getting that prospect promotion incentive pick for Caminero if he wins Rookie of the Year next year. And after the Paredes trade, it would certainly seem that Caminero has a pretty damn good shot at winning AL Rookie of the Year next year if he's healthy. So August 25th was that date. So maybe the 25th, maybe the 26th. I doubt they would keep him there through the end of the AAA season, but maybe. There's no guarantee he'll be up in late August, but that would be the soonest. And then once Caminero's up, I do expect him to play pretty much every day. He clears that bar for me as like a Rays everyday type of player, and he bats right-handed, so it's not like they're going to short side platoon him or anything. Michael O'Brien says, in one of your last updates, you explained Chase Lawlar of the Guardians drop as a result of his injury history and body type. The body type is probably better for Jordan Lawlar, but does his continued injured status not scare you at all? Dude can't stay healthy. Well, it does scare me. It does not scare me as much as Chase Lawlar. I mean, how could you not be scared of Lawlar's injury issues? I know I have him ranked at 11. So maybe that ranking doesn't seem like I'm scared of it, but if Lawlar had no durability issues at all, I would have him probably 5th or 6th on my rankings. So I am penalizing him a little bit because of the injury issues, and I'll just go ahead and read Jordan Lawlar's lengthy injury history since getting drafted. Shoulder surgery, a back injury, a fractured scapula, wrist injury, a hit by pitch on the hand, thumb surgery, and a hamstring strain. So it's a lot of stuff, but it's not a lot of the same stuff. I mean, there's multiple stuff to do with like the wrist or hand or thumb. So I definitely would recommend Jordan Lawlar stop getting hit by pitches if he can avoid that at all. You got fractured scapula and you got shoulder surgery. So I guess you could say those are linked a little, but it's different for me than with Chase Lawlar, where you've got just nonstop foot issues on the same foot and then the other foot, and he's this massive outfielder trying to run around out there. Another guy that I always think of is Eloy Jimenez. Like when Eloy Jimenez was coming up as a prospect with the Cubs or White Sox, the one negative I'd mentioned in multiple of his outlooks was that he just always seems to miss time with lower body, like muscle strains, like quad strains, that type of thing. And there was a pattern there. There's a pattern of Lawlar getting hurt, but I don't see it as like the same type of pattern of like DeLauder or Eloy, where it's like the same injury again and again and again. And it's because these massive guys are trying to play the outfield. So I don't feel good about having Jordan Lawlar ranked at 11th, but I also wouldn't feel very good about having him ranked like 20th, just because of how talented I think he is and how like he's basically big league ready. It's just kind of get healthy, get into a groove, and you're up. So he's a very tough player to rank, a very tough player to value in Dynasty. If you're, when I list off all those injuries, if to you that is, you don't want anything to do with this guy because he keeps getting all these different injuries, I don't really blame you, but I also just think this is like a low point in his trade value. So if you were to trade Jordan Lawlar today, there's a chance you're selling him at like his lowest point of like a 10-year span. Maybe it's the right move. If you see some guys that I have ranked ahead of him that you could get him for, then do it. If you see guys I have ranked behind him that you definitely prefer to Lawlar, go nuts and try to do that as well. But if he's healthy when he gets to spring training next year and looks good and stays healthy throughout the spring, I do think I'll be going back in on post-hype Jordan Lawlar, but I understand it. It was not easy for me to just slot him in at 11 because I do have those same injury concerns, but just not maybe to the extent that Michael does. Okay, prospect vibe check says, I understand that Henry Bolte of the A's has strikeout concerns, but isn't the fact that he's 20 in AA and has to this point put together an 867 OPS season with 12 homers, 36 steals, and a 12% walk rate warrant more consideration? The raw tools are good enough to offset the K concerns at the higher levels. Well, Bolte has a 62% contact rate this year, and that was primarily at high A. I know he's got like 20 games at AA now, but that's pretty, it's pretty tough to get past 62% contact rate. So, for you, the raw tools are good enough to offset the K concerns at higher levels. But for me, I kind of start the process the other way, looking at the K concerns first, and then kind of figuring out how high I'm comfortable putting him based on the raw tools. Double A is often the level where these guys get exposed, and I don't see a reason to just assume Bolte will figure it out because he's got good raw tools. If he had like a 68% contact rate and a 32% strikeout rate, then I would probably be more on your side, closer to your evaluation of, this guy's really young. He's at Double A, but it's 36% strikeout rate at Double A right now, 62% contact rate on the season. So to me, there is the risk kind of outweighs the raw tools, at least for now with Bolte. I mean, I've got him ranked. I think I got him ranked like in the mid 200s, maybe. He's someone that I would mention, like if anyone's like, who's someone ranked outside the top 200 that has a chance to, shoot up into the top 100. Like Bolte's, he's a good name to bring up, but I'm definitely more concerned than you are by the hit tool. CPAR08 says, I was surprised to see Marco Luciano move up to 107 on the latest rankings. What do you see? Also, 5 to 6 years into the Farhan Zaidi era, where do you slot the Giants overall relative to other MLB clubs as it pertains to drafting, scouting, development, etc.? Just when I'm about to lose all hope, guys like Julio Ramos, Tyler Fitzgerald, and Hayden Birdsong take big strides. Well, I'm glad you asked about Luciano. I think something may have, there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of the caliber competition at AAA right now. But I do think there's a chance something may have clicked for Luciano this time around at AAA. I know he just got called up, I think yesterday, Tuesday, Luciano, but he had a 483 OBP, 5 homers and 15 walks with just 12 strikeouts in his last 12 games at AAA before he got the call. And then even if you want to go back to like when he returned, I think he returned from an injury June 11th. If you go back to June 11th, he had a 370 OBP, an 18% walk rate, and a 26.5% strikeout rate. So that's the best production we've seen from Luciano at AAA in terms of commanding the zone, getting on base. He is going to be I think he will be more of an OBP than batting average type of player, but obviously extreme pedigree with Luciano, a former top 15 overall prospect, maybe even top 10. And Julio Ramos, I thought, showed similar flashes late last season. And I'm still kicking myself for not having him in more leagues just because I was worried about the fact he was right-handed and they short side platooned him a little bit last year. But just the fact that Julio Ramos went on to break out this year, I'm intrigued by the idea of Luciano doing the same either down the stretch this year or next year. So, I've always been a little hesitant with Luciano because of the hit tool and the fact that he's not going to steal as many bases as your typical shortstop. But I would not be surprised if Luciano is like a big time post type breakout in 2025. I think there's some flashes there, and putting a guy like that just outside the top 100, that seems like a fine bet to make. And then sort of the overall question about the Giants, they've been worse at drafting and developing since Zaidi took over than I would have expected. They only have 8 prospects on my top 400 right now, which is pretty poor considering they have significant resources. They haven't been competing at a very high level the past 2 seasons. So, in a perfect world, if you're not really in the mix, you're at least cashing out some veterans at the deadline and getting some prospects back to restock the system. And they haven't done a ton of that. I really disliked the Michael Conforto and Jorge Soler signings when those happened. You're signing bat first players. So if it doesn't pan out, you still can't really get much for those guys at the deadline. They basically salary dumped Jorge Soler. They sort of seem to just they don't get any of their priority free agent targets, and so they just spend the money anyways. But I like the Matt Chapman signing. I thought that was smart because he's a really good defender. But I haven't really loved the vision with the Giants. So I guess, where would they slot? I don't think they would be like bottom 5, but I don't think they would be top half either. I did not see the Tyler Fitzgerald thing coming at all, obviously. And he's probably going to regress pretty significantly down the stretch, but it'd be great to see, Helio Ramos, Marco Luciano, Luis Matos, Patrick Bailey, really kind of making strides as sort of like a young core that people get excited about next year, but TBD on that. And then James Salenak says, I've had some interest in Hayden Birdsong for some time now. What's your logic behind this type of bump up the board? I absolutely love Hayden Birdsong and what he's done in the majors so far. I think I've been higher on Birdsong pretty much every step of the way. He had the control issues in the lower levels, and there was some reliever risk there, but I've always loved the stuff with Bird starters repertoire. He's thrown 4 pitches over 15% of the time. He sits at 96 miles an hour with his fastball. He's got a plus slider. He's shown bigger strides as a pure pitcher and a strike thrower than I would have expected. Like even when I was high on him, I did not think this was going to be a, barely spends any time at AAA and he's up and he's having success in the big leagues type of guy. So he's exceeded even my expectations. And I love the home park. I love the fact that he's got significant value right now for contenders and rebuilders since he's currently in the big league rotation. And I just got Birdsong at pick 70 overall of Chris Welsh's P1 ADP prospect mock that I'm participating in. So I've got him ranked 31st. I got him at 70 overall. So I think he's a buy high right now. And Birdsong is someone that I plan on having a lot of in 2025 if he finishes the year healthy. Bob May says, just wondering where you would rank Christian Scott of the Mets if he was still prospect eligible. Also wanted to hear your thoughts on Brandon Sproat of the Mets and his rankings drop. I'll get to Sproat in a second, but I'm really glad I don't have to rank Christian Scott anymore. That's something I'm very thankful for. So I thought Christian Scott looked like the player I had ranked as a top 25 prospect in his big league debut, but that was also just the peak of how he looked this year in the big leagues. The fastball velocity, I think, peaked in that first start as well. And ever since then, he just hadn't looked like the same guy. His stuff wasn't as crisp. So I'm wondering, is this something, was his elbow or arm kind of bothering him that whole time? We may or may not ever find that out, but, I'm assuming he's eventually going to get Tommy John surgery and before we see him back in the big leagues. And so hopefully the stuff comes all the way back. Scott could get Tommy John surgery now. He could get it in a couple months and he'd still have the same timetable, 2026. So, you're talking about, I still think Scott could be like a number 3 starter, maybe even a high-end number 3 starter, a guy that helps you with whip, a guy with a favorable home park. So I'd probably still have him in that 50 to 100 range if he was eligible, but glad I don't have to rank Christian Scott anymore and don't plan on being able to use him until 2026. And then Brandon Sproat. Yeah, I got a question from Corey B3P. Why the drop for Brandon Sproat? This, totally fair. Got multiple questions about him falling out of the top 100, and I rightfully so. Sometimes guys just slip in the rankings without me setting out to drop them. And I think Blade Tidwell's massive struggles after going from AA to AAA may have subconsciously spooked me a little on having Sproat ranked kind of in that mid 100s range. Just looking at the pitchers that are ranked ahead of Sproat, I do regret having him behind Chase Petty of the Reds, behind Braxton Ashcraft of the Pirates. I would definitely take Sproat over Petty and Ashcraft if I were redoing the rankings. But I don't know if I would necessarily take him over the rest of the guys I have ahead of him. So like Quinn Matthews of the Cardinals, Jackson Ferris of the Dodgers, Noble Meyer of the Marlins, Herschel Waldrop. Those are the types of guys I have ranked just ahead of Petty and Ashcraft. So I don't think I would necessarily take Sproat over those guys, but the values of the prospects in this range it's really pretty flat. And so, like if you just said I like Brandon Sproat more than Cade Horton, who you have at 57, I wouldn't even really push back much there. Like that's kind of where it sort of flattens out. But I will say, for what it's worth, every pitcher I've got ranked ahead of Sproat, who is at AA or lower, is younger than Sproat. So I don't have anyone older than Sproat at AA ranked ahead of Sproat. Maybe another way to put that. Richard Sands says, where would Spencer Schwellenbach of Atlanta rank if he was still eligible? Schwellenbach would rank very high, probably around 20th overall. So that would be, he'd be behind Jackson Jobe. And then like it's, Andrew Painter at 16, Noah Schultz of the White Sox at 18. I could see a case for Schwellenbach over either of those guys. I could see a case for Schwellenbach over Matt Shaw, Luke Keaschall, Jet Williams. So yeah, like late teens, early 20s for Schwellenbach. And like I said with Birdsong, one of the great things about Schwellenbach is he's got significant value to contending and rebuilding teams alike. So a lot of the times with the pitching prospects, it's like if you're a contending team, you would devalue them significantly to try to win your league, but Schwellenbach can help you win your league. So that's nice. Gordy Myers says, what separates your Dominican Summer League evaluations when the stats are, well, the DSL, basically, a lot of guys in the DSL have awesome stats. So what separates them? Gordy listed Jesus Mate of the Brewers, Emil Morales of the Dodgers, Luis Pena of the Brewers, Jose Anderson of the Brewers, Paulinho Santana of the Rangers. He also listed he said F. Arias. So I wasn't sure if you're talking about Franklin Arias of the Red Sox. Arias is already up to single A, so he doesn't really fit the question there. But if you meant a different Arias, let me know. I guess for what separates the DSL guys. So like even since this update, I would probably have Emil Morales even higher. I think I have Morales like around 200, but I mean he's just on a pretty crazy heater right now. Morales is a bit bigger than the classic kind of DSL guy that I'm really gravitating towards. Like I'd like it to be kind of like in the 6 foot, 6'2" type of range, 5'11" maybe, really good athleticism. Morales is a bit bigger than that, but he's just going to absolute town on DSL pitching. Dodgers have a decent track record of those guys carrying that success over in complex ball. So Morales would be even a little bit higher now. Jesus Mate, I do have the highest. A lot of it is going back and comparing my notes from the breakout rookie level hitters article that I release every year before those leagues open, and comparing my notes on them then with their production, what they're doing in games. And so for Jesus Mate, the pluses coming into the year were pedigree, age, level, and power. And he's showing one of the best hit tools statistically in the DSL, way more walks and strikeouts. And he's 22 for 25 on stolen base attempts. So he's filling in those other categories that weren't necessarily pluses coming into the year. So I think Mate is looking like a 5-category type of player. There's some anchoring involved with a guy like Santana. If you don't really care about what I thought about a player before the season and you just want to look at their stats and everything, you could be a little lower on Santana than I am, but I was higher on him coming into the year based on video and the public reports. And he did not hit for power in the DSL, but he did everything else well. So, I lowered him. He's not a must hold in Dynasty, but I am intrigued still by what he could bring to the table if he can start to send in some balls over the fence. And then, like I'll factor in reports from places like Baseball America. They had a very glowing report on Jose Anderson of the Brewers, who wasn't even a notable enough signee to be featured in my breakout rookie level hitters article. But the scouting report kind of backs up the performance of the guy like that. So it's a combination of a bunch of stuff, but I'm going back a lot and looking at my breakout rookie level hitters article, which I'll link to in this mailbag article here. Okay, Cluo87 says, is Sebastian Walcott of the Rangers a potential number 1 overall prospect if he gets a run at AA and looks even average? If Walcott gets run at AA and looks average, so I'll say like 100 WRC plus, I don't think that'd be enough for him to pass Junior Caminero, Kobe Mayo, or Walker Jenkins, who I expect to all retain their prospect eligibility heading into the offseason. Walcott could pass Charlie Condon or Roman Anthony pretty easily, though. Like even if Walcott just finished really strong at high A and those two, Condon and Anthony, don't go nuts over the final weeks, Walcott could jump those guys. If he got to AA and was decent, he could pass Jason Dominguez, I guess, of the Yankees, and he could pass Jackson Jobe of the Tigers. But I don't want to get bump a guy all the way up to 10th overall in Walcott here. I don't want to just go right into like, well, could he be 5th? Could he be 3rd? Could he be 1st? He's an 18-year-old. He's 10th overall. He's in really good company. So I would just kind of enjoy it where it is right now. If you got Walcott, he could definitely be the number 1 overall prospect someday, but I don't think it would be at the end of this year. JJ says Sebastian Walcott of the Rangers, Leo Dallas DeVries of the Padres, JJ Weatherholt of the Cardinals, or Jack Caglione of the Royals. Who has the highest ceiling? It's in the order you listed them, and that's the order they're ranked. So Walcott, DeVries, Weatherholt, Caglione. There's a bit of a drop to me ceiling-wise from Walcott and DeVries to Weatherholt and Caglione. I think Weatherholt's hit tool is at least a grade, maybe 2 grades better than Caglione's. He's going to steal 30 bases. Caglione's not going to steal any bases. So Caglione obviously has more power than Weatherholt, but I think Weatherholt more than makes up for that with his hit tool and his speed. All right, so Finney says, who is currently giving you the high risk, high reward vibe? It doesn't always pan out, but that's fine. Elliot de la Cruz worked out, and so far Sebastian Walcott of the Rangers, it looks like he's going to work out. And then Finney throws out some candidates here. So he has Roderick Arias's improved July K rate, maybe. Arias of the Yankees, obviously. And then Johnny Farmello he lists of the Mariners, Christian Campbell of the Red Sox, the Password, Josh Nixon Garcia of the Red Sox, Braden Taylor of the Rays, I Hear Hope of the Dodgers. Are Finney's candidates there for someone that could follow in the line of Elliot de la Cruz or Sebastian Walcott? It's good to see that Roderick Arias cut his strikeout rate, 21% in July, but he's also got just 1 homer this month, and he's going to turn 20 in September. So, Ellie had a 161 WRC plus at high A and got to AA as a 20-year-old. So Arias is just he's too far behind these guys. I know he's missed time with injury, but his age, like if Arias was 18 and doing and improving a little bit at single A, that might be one thing, but he's fixed the strikeout issues, but hasn't maintained the power output. So I feel good about where I've got Arias ranked. I like Farmello. I like Christian Campbell. I like the Password, and I especially like Zahir Hope as candidates here. Braden Taylor, he just doesn't give me the high risk vibes. His only issue is he's been old for his levels, and I think that he is maybe that's maybe allowed him to put up stats you might associate with like a high ceiling player. But I view Braden Taylor as more just a really solid all around player, not a superstar, but just a really good prospect. Not a boomer bust type of prospect for me. So I used the top 400 filters and I looked at only hitters 20 and younger to get the high reward guys, and with a K percentage of 22% or higher to get the high risk guys. And so these are the prospects I found outside the top 50 that I think might fit. So I think you're onto something with Zahir Hope of the Dodgers. You're onto something with Johnny Farmelo of the Mariners. Farmelo is obviously injured right now. Otherwise, he might be 30, 40 spots higher in the top 400. Robert Kalaz of the Rockies, Ty Pete of the Mariners, Drew Jones of the Diamondbacks, and Eric Batanti of the Brewers are some of the better answers I could come up with. Again, if you're not using the top 100 filters, I think you're missing out. It's a great way to kind of isolate certain player types to find guys that might fit what you're looking for. And then speaking of Robert Kalaz, BitCloud says, how do you parse the high-end StatCast guys who aren't even in full season ball yet? It feels like someone like Robert Kalaz of the Rockies could be anywhere between 40 and 200 on the top 400. Maybe a better question is, who are some of your favorite young bats at the complex level? So Kalaz, it's just, I've got him just outside the top 100. It's hard for me to get fully bought in on a guy who's 18 and 8 months with 0 full season experience, strikeout rate in the 20s. Rookie ball is just so easy right now for hitters, hitter-friendly parks, bad pitching, that having success as an older 18-year-old in the complex league, it's not something that guarantees future success. So it's hard for me to go all the way in on a guy like that. But if you don't care at all about risk or ETA, you could value him at 40. So I agree with you about the fact that like Kalaz could be in that 40 to 200 range. As for my favorite young bats at the complex level, Felnin Celestine of the Mariners, he's injured right now. He's got a wrist injury. He's played in 1 game since June 20th. But I mean, just in terms of judging a guy physically, tools wise, Celestine has top 10 prospect potential just based on his rare athleticism and power speed combo, but would be nice to see him kind of stay healthy and get to a full season ball. But Eduardo Quintero of the Dodgers is probably the guy that answers your question of like, who's someone you really believe in rookie ball. Quintero, he just looks like the total package to me. He's he hits the ball hard. He's got a ton of speed. He's going to provide value in center field. Strikeout rate's in a great spot for complex league with Quintero. So really like him. And then after Celestine and Quintero, and excluding 2024 draftees, you quickly get to Joendry Vargas of the Dodgers, Kalaz, Braylor Guerrero of the Rays, Starlin Caba of the Phillies. I'd probably round out my favorite young bats at the complex level. Okay, Yabo, or your boy Fritz Lang. I saw Dewell Joseph of the Mariners dropped off entirely. I remember him being loved more by a guest on the pod, but curious if he's dropped more because you're out on him or more by default because of all the new names from the draft. So sometimes we hit on guys like Joseph in the DSL, and sometimes we don't. But it's almost unheard of for a guy to struggle significantly in the Dominican Summer League and then go on to become a phenom. Joseph is a good athlete, and he was a bit unlucky on balls in play. But a 48 WRC plus in the DSL with a full sample, that's just going to get you off the list no matter what. It's kind of a disqualifier to me. Like you don't struggle that much in the DSL and then go on to do great things. Finney says, do the ranks for A's prospects attribute that their home park for the next 2 seasons is going to be a joke, and Las Vegas could be too, with how And then he says, with how notorious the Mariners park has become, I assume that dings guys like Cole Young of the Mariners. What if they change the park given how bad it's become? So I'll answer the Young part first. I'm just lower on Cole Young. The park definitely won't do him any favors, but I just don't see much fantasy impact there with Cole Young. Like, I think his upside is like Bryson Stott, and his downside is like a bench infielder. He's just not very physical. He's the type of guy who's going to put up better numbers in the lower levels because of his command of the zone, but better pitchers with better stuff are going to be able to challenge him more. So I think Cole Young's one of the most overrated prospects out there. As for the A's, if we're going to speculate, like you were just speculating on the Mariners changing their park, why not speculate about Sacramento moving their fences back? I mean, that could happen. And I think you said next 2 seasons. I think it's actually the next 3 seasons are going to be in Sacramento. But so, with the A's hitters, 90% or so of my ranking of the A's guys is just going to come down to whether I think the player is going to be good. And then, you can give him a minor bump for the potential park upgrade, but I'm excited to see what Derek Carty has to say about the park factors this offseason at First Pitch Florida. Hopefully he's there and can do that talk again. I might give the A's hitters more of a bump once it becomes clear, like what Carty expects the impact to be. But for what it's worth, Matt Eddy does a great job with Baseball America of doing the park factors in the minor leagues. And Sacramento is the 5th worst AAA park for hitting homers, ahead of only Nashville, Toledo, Gwinnett, and Sugar Land. So it's not like they're moving to Las Vegas or Albuquerque next year. It's going to be a better hitters park than the Coliseum, but I'd like to feel more confident about just how exactly it's going to play. Okay, Scooter says, I think the news that Ricky Tiedemann would have Tommy John surgery broke after your list was published. With this news, where would you now place Tiedemann? Well, not to pat myself on the back here, but I ranked Tiedemann under the assumption he'd get Tommy John surgery. So no change in his value. Do we think, Cluo87 says, do we think Angel Martinez is part of the Guardians' future as they get a potential influx of future talent in Kyle Manzardo, Travis Bazzana, and Chase DeLauder? I think Martinez at least has a shot. Unlike Kyle Manzardo, Martinez has actually had some success in the majors, and he can play more positions than Manzardo, and he's younger than Manzardo. So, I don't think Manzardo is going to cut into Angel Martinez's playing time. Travis Bazzana is obviously going to be the second baseman of the future there in Cleveland. By the time he's ready, they've probably traded Andres Jimenez already. DeLauder's a right fielder if it all works out. So I don't think he's competing with Martinez either. I think Martinez is kind of competing with the Tyler Freemans and Will Brennans and Brian Rocchios and Daniel Schneemans of the world for opportunities. So I don't think Martinez is a definite starter or anything like that, but I think he's shown enough to at least be like a top 200 prospect. Composite says, are Lazaro Montes of the Mariners struggles in high A reason for enough concern to try to sell high while I can? Well, I ranked him in a spot where I would sell high on him if you can get someone I've ranked ahead of him, and I would not sell low enough on him to trade him for someone I've ranked behind him. But Montes was the 21st prospect selected in that P1 ADP mock I'm in right now, and he's not in my top 30. So I think I've got him ranked 32. I think you could trade Lazaro Montes for Hayden Birdsong in some dynasty leagues. I think you could at least try to trade him for like Marcelo Mayer. You could try to trade him for Bryce Eldridge, maybe Brady House, maybe Josue DePaula, maybe Bubba Chandler. Like if you can, maybe Jet Williams. maybe Luke Keaschall. Like if you can trade him for those guys, I would trade him for those guys, but I wouldn't just be like best offer gets Lazaro Montes. It's concerning, but it's not necessarily that surprising given the jump in competition and the fact that Montes' hit tool is kind of the only question with him. So, you could see Montes lower on the next update, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he kind of figured things out before the next update. So, Cluo87 says, how much are we believing in Lawrence Butler? He's always had some exciting underlying metrics and hard hit data. Yeah, the only thing I don't love about Lawrence Butler is that I don't have more shares of him. I at least have some. I've got him in AL Labor. I've got him in some draft and holds, but I was too slow to jump on him after he got sent to AAA. Really kicking myself for that one. That was a great buy low opportunity on Lawrence Butler in Dynasty. I love everything I'm seeing. I think he could go 25-20 next year. Gonna be really interested to see what the price is on Lawrence Butler in 2025. Dawes Williams says, I expected to see Casey Hunt of the Brewers make the top 100. Not a ton of info on him, but great surface stats backed up by a tremendous K- walk. He's old for the levels he's played at, but that never keeps you from ranking a pitcher high if you believe. You're a Brewers fan, so I'd love to hear your insight. Casey Hunt of the Brewers, he does have awesome surface stats. He's, if you want to value him as a top 400 prospect or even a top 300 prospect, I have no problems with that at all. He's 24. He sits at 93 miles an hour with his fastball. And if I ranked him, he would be the oldest pitcher on the list below AA. So, generally you're correct about my philosophy about, I definitely care less about age with pitchers than I do with hitters. But 24 at high A, I'd want to at least see, sitting 95 with the fastball maybe. And the Brewers just have so many interesting pitching prospects. I was kind of looking for reasons to exclude some of the guys. So Hunt's age and mediocre velocity seemed like fair tiebreakers there. But again, no problem at all if you want to value Casey Hunt of the Brewers as a top 250, top 300 prospect. When I'm doing the top 400, I'm basically I'm looking for any reason to bump any pitcher out of the top 400, right? Because I think you guys want to see hitters probably more than pitchers. So Ross Redk says, thoughts on Mike Burrows of the Pirates who missed the top 400. Burrows probably should have made the list, and that was an oversight. I think Burrows I'd probably put in the 250 range or so. He just came back from injury, so I whiffed on the Mike Burrows one. I do think he's about a top 250 prospect or so. It'd be great to see him get some starts in the majors down the stretch. And then while we're talking about omissions, I also regretted leaving off DJ Hers of the Nationals. Nobody asked about him, but I think he probably should have been in that 200 to 300 range as well. Just Hers really surprised me, but the Nationals, quietly doing a pretty good job with pitching. Let's see. Let's do one more here. Yick says, who do you like more long-term, Tyler Fitzgerald of the Giants or Xavier Edwards of the Marlins? So I know Fitzgerald has more insane numbers right now, but I love what Edwards is doing, and I think it's more sustainable, especially heading into next season. Xavier Edwards, he's not going to hit for much power. I think that's always been the case, but he could steal 40 bases next year with a good average and a ton of runs, or at least as many runs as you can get hitting high in the Marlins lineup. And just big shout out to Dylan White of Baseball America for remaining high on Xavier Edwards. Otherwise, I may not have added him in my best NFBC main event league a month ago, which has just been a fun ride. So big shout out to Dylan White there. All right. So the podcast is brought to you by Pick Six, the new game the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Use code RWPicks for $50 in Pick 6 credits with a $5 deposit. I will have this article up on the site for you, hopefully this evening, Wednesday. So thanks for listening. Thanks for the questions.